We stand against totalitarianism, particularly imperialist expansionist totalitarianism. We are for democracy and human rights, and we are for a worldwide prosperity that only free economies can give, and the pursuit of human happiness that only political freedom allows.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Andrea Shaffer Show. Today I have Jake Novak. He has been a professional journalist, political and economic analyst, an editorial columnist, as an executive producer, an opinion writer at Fox, CNN, CNBC, and several local TV news stations. Established himself as an expert on all major issues. Currently predicting the Trump victory and the current state of affairs in the Middle East, and boiling down a host of economic issues from the industry in the different sectors. Welcome, Jake. I'm so happy to have you. We've been trying to do this for a little while. Most of it's been my fault. I've been sick, trying to recover, and I apologize for the inconveniences. But thank you for coming on board. If you just want to introduce yourself and tell the audience anything else about yourself, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Well, first of all, no inconvenience at all on my end. You haven't done that at all, so no need to apologize. Happy to join you today to talk about all the issues that are percolating. Of course, it's fast and furious, and sometimes it can get pretty confusing, but I really love being able to not only inform people in a brief and clear way about what the stories are, but to give them a little bit of analysis as well, hopefully with some real facts behind them. So that's always what I try to do. And it's exciting that there's different ways to reach people than we didn't have before. So, with all the glitches and different things that go on, it's still a blessing that we can do stuff like this without having to beg the big networks to give us airtime.
It certainly is. You've had a pretty good career. Just recently, you have left Real America's Voice, I think, to go out and broaden the market per se. You've been filling in at a local WABC network in the New York City area. Is that correct?
Yeah. WABC Radio still has the ABC call letters, but it's not affiliated with the Disney ABC Corporation anymore. But it's the biggest talk radio station in the country. Now, it's not only on in New York, of course, it's available nationally, and they have something like 500 affiliates. So lately I've been doing some programs for them, and hopefully in the coming days I'll have an announcement about a full-time position there that I'll be able to tell more people about. So I'm very excited about this next move.
Well, I wish you all the luck, Jake. You really do have some really great sound political analysis. So today we're going to talk about current events, not only in America, but also across the world. I wanted to start off the program on events that have transpired in Israel recently, and it's the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount, and Jake has the history on it, was actually the first Jewish temple, BC, like 500 BC, before Christ. And over the years, after Israel became a state, the Arab nations had taken over the Temple Mount. So can you tell us the significance of that today, Jake, and the history behind it?
Let's first of all talk about the spot geographically. It is known as the Temple Mount. Muslims call it Al-Aqsa, but even the Muslims, until very, very recently, all acknowledge that this is the original most holy site in the world for the Jews. Muslims don't consider this to be in their top two even. They consider it to be maybe third, fourth place for them. This is the holiest place on earth for Jews, where the first and second holy temples in Jerusalem were built. The first built by King Solomon, the second built by a number of different characters over time, but King Herod was the last one who sort of modernized it. But this is where sacrifices were given. Jewish worship as it is today, with communal singing and the reading of the scripture and the prayers. The only thing that was also done, it was mostly sacrifices, animal sacrifice, with some reading of the scripture. The practice of Judaism now is different from what it was during the time of the Holy Temple, but Jews, we communally believe that when the Messiah comes, we will be able to return to the temple and be able to have animal sacrifice again in the whole 9 yards. Israel took control physically, the state of Israel took control physically of the Temple Mount as a result of the Six-Day War in 1967. But Andrea, because there were so many Jews still living in Arab lands at the time, and because Israel is still surrounded by Arab neighbors, the Israeli government decided within hours of the takeover of the Temple Mount that they would allow the the Muslim religious authority to continue to have religious control over the Temple Mount. And even more so, they decided that it wouldn't be a good idea to allow Jewish groups to have formal prayer on the Temple Mount. In other words, you can go onto the Temple Mount as a Jew quietly and just in your mind say a prayer, but literally the Israeli police will, until now, would arrest you if you tried to have a Jewish prayer service on the Temple Mount. And you can understand some of the reasoning behind that 60, 50, 40 years ago. But what we've seen, Andrea, for the last many decades is despite that excess of caution, and I would say decency on behalf of the Israeli government, the exact opposite narrative has been pushed throughout the Arab world. So what I mean by that is instead of the Arab world saying, I mean, they could even say it this way, look at those Jews, they didn't even take over the Temple Mount. They let us continue to have it. Isn't that funny? Instead, they tell every Arab Muslim child all over the world that the Jews have done the exact opposite of the truth. They say, oh, you know what? They don't let us pray on the Temple Mount. They don't let Muslims pray on the Temple Mount. They only let Jews do it, when the exact opposite is true. And that has been the case for about 40 years. They've been spreading that blood libel for 40, 50, 60 years. And even with that, and by the way, that has been a big impetus for getting a lot of young Arab Muslims to want to join armies and kill Israelis. They really believe this nonsense. So finally, the Israeli government is realizing that no matter what they do, no matter what overture they send out to the Islamic world, it still isn't going to end to any kind of result other than the murdering of Israelis, or the attempted murder. So they are finally now going to allow Jews to pray in groups. I'm sure it'll still be very regulated, Andrea, but they will now be able to have scripture. They will be able to read the Torah scripture, the Bible scripture. They will be able to have some kind of formal prayer groups. Again, I'm sure it'll be in moderation on the Temple Mount. It's long overdue. Again, I agree. I don't necessarily agree, but I understand the Israeli government's caution way back in 1967, almost 60 years ago. I understand where it came from. But it turns out that was a failed policy. I'll tell you what wasn't a failed policy, though. The physical state of the Temple Mount, which is mostly, again, two Muslim mosques, is exponentially better than it was in 1967, thanks to Israeli protection and some Israeli funding and the protection of other funding going in there. It's in a much better state than it ever was. This has been a tremendous gift to the religion of Islam that has not been reciprocated, that has not been thanked by the Muslim leaders throughout the world, and it should be. I think that there are some who sort of quietly realize it, but they won't ever publicly acknowledge it. I will say this, though. Beginning 6 years ago, the Saudi news media, which of course is completely controlled by the government in Saudi Arabia, started to publish stories about the truth about the Temple Mount, about how it was, of course, a Jewish holy site. It's the Jewish holiest site, and not anywhere near as holy as for Muslims, things like that. So there has been a little bit of positive results there. But I think the Israeli government, after October 7th and the war with Hamas, realizing that there's just there's no PR war to win with the Muslims. There's no kindness that Israel is going to do that's going to result in anything coming back from Israel. And in this case, it isn't even a kindness. It's actually a cruelty to Jews who want to pray at the holiest site. So that's what we're seeing right now. And I hope it's not going to lead to any more terrorism. The crazies in the mainstream media who don't know anything about the subject will say this, and it'll be laughable because since 1967, what do we have? Peace? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's not going to be the cause of any new terrorist attack, and it's going to be just a real step forward for religious freedom. And by the way, Christians will be able to benefit from this as well. They're certainly going to be able to get more religious freedom on the Temple Mount as well. So I think this is a win for everyone. I'm not saying it's going to reduce terrorism, but anyone who thinks it's going to increase terrorism just hasn't been paying attention for the last 60 years.
So my understanding is after October 7th, a lot more Christians started going to the Holy Mount. And I think the pressure from the wider community, not just the Jewish population, turned the corner as far as opening up the Holy Temple to more people. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Christian, you believe that the Temple Mount, that's where Jesus went and, attacked the money changers and gave many of his messages. I mean, Jesus wasn't rejecting the holiness of the temple itself. He was rejecting those who were defiling it which even according to Jewish law and our Jewish teaching, he was right about that. There was absolutely a problem going on at the time within the Jewish community as well. So the point being, this is a very, very important site. This is the holiest site in the world, I would say, really for Jews and Christians. I mean, I guess some Catholics might believe the Vatican is somehow holier, although I'm not so sure even they would say that. And the fact that it's maybe third place for Muslims and that they haven't respected it, there's a lot of evidence that they have destroyed historical archaeological items within the Temple Mount. The Israeli antiquities authorities have been trying for years to get at some of the buried archaeological material that was there from the temples, from both temples. And we have evidence that the Arab Muslim groups there have destroyed it and have at least blocked it. So we can't allow this to continue. The group that controls the religious structure of the Temple Mount is called the Waqf. It's spelled WAQF. It's a Jordanian group. Jordan occupied, literally occupied, legally occupied what is now known as the Temple Mount and East Jerusalem for many years before the Six-Day War. For those people who use that term for the Israelis and say the Israelis have occupied territory, you can use that term all you want, but legally, the territory that Israel controls in what is known as the West Bank or East Jerusalem is legally, according even to the UN, as disputed territory, not occupied. But when Jordan occupied it, everyone acknowledged it was an occupied territory by Jordan. And for some reason, the Israeli government has until now continued to believe that Jordan would act honorably in return for the protection and the respect that the Israeli government was giving their religious authorities. And they got nothing of the sort. The millions and millions of Arab children growing up being told that Muslims aren't allowed to pray at the Temple Mount and things like that. In 1 second, the Jordanian authorities could have said, no, that's not true. They could even say, we don't like the Israelis, but that particular lie isn't true. And they never lifted a finger to do that. And they could have saved, forget about the Israeli lives they could have saved. They could have saved hundreds of thousands of Arab lives who've gone into wars and armies and blown themselves up over this lie. And it didn't work out. It was an attempt to extend an olive branch to the Muslim world at the expense of the Jewish and the Christian communities, and it didn't work. And it seems like the Israeli government's finally realizing it and doing something about it.
I'm great to hear that. Thank you, Jake, to have your perspective on it. So thank you very much. I'm a Christian, and I'm glad that it's opening up for more people, for more prayers. My understanding is before, and then we'll move on to a next subject, is you couldn't even bring scripture with you
Right.
to the Mount. And that was just egregious. So
Yeah,
I appreciate your perspective.
Yeah. There was a rabbi a few years ago who just stood on the Temple Mount praying with his own prayer book just to protest this in a peaceful way. All he was doing was praying, and he was stabbed. He was stabbed just by some Muslim worshiper who walked by him and stabbed him, and he barely survived. Whether it's Minneapolis when they're attacking a church, Andrea, or a rabbi who's just praying on the Temple Mount and they feel like they need to attack you, then you kind of know that you're in the right and they're in the wrong, don't you?
Correct. So moving on, this podcast covers culture, politics, and current events. So a lot has transpired over the last couple of weeks, starting with Minnesota and the two unfortunate deaths through ICE, although they were instigated by the individuals and by groups of people. But I had another individual on my podcast, Trevor Loudon, which, by the way, everybody should go and watch it. It's the second number one viewed video that I have, and I just started my podcast in the last month. He discussed it's not going to stay in Minnesota. It's going to spread across the United States. This is going to be the most ugly ground, and I don't use this word lightly, civil war that we have seen in modern American history. So last night there was a kerfuffle in and you can describe it however you want, Jake, in Los Angeles, from my understanding, that ICE was attacked again. And then we're going to move to New Jersey and possibly New York. So if you could just give the audience your perspective on what happened with the ICE agents last night in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say that I kind of predicted it. I mean, I wish I had been wrong, but yesterday and Friday, so this would be Friday, January 30th, on my own daily video program that I do in the morning, I talked about how while everyone was focusing on Minneapolis, ICE had been really ramping up and speeding up its enforcement in Los Angeles. In fact, they were getting to a point where they were, on average, ICE was showing up at locations, finding illegal immigrants, and detaining them, and then getting out of the that location sometimes within 30 seconds. So I said, basically, they're doing a good job while everyone is focusing on Minneapolis and St. Paul of ramping up things in LA. Well, that only lasted for a couple of days because the LA Times put that on the front page on Thursday, I want to say. And predictably, they had a very large and violent protest outside an ICE facility in Los Angeles. It got extremely violent. They started to really start firing weapons at certain ICE agents and at the building. It took a long time for it to quiet down. And of course, this is the same scenario as we saw in Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota more broadly. The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, and Karen Bass, the LA mayor, have also made very, very insightful comments about ICE that don't convince people. This is, by the way, this is the same thing as bigotry. The insightful and horrible things that these people are saying, that Governor Walz or District Attorney Krasner in Philadelphia or Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, that doesn't convince someone to hate ICE. They already hated ICE. What that does is it provides the cover. So in other words, when people say if we want to have people stop hating people, they have to stop saying hateful things. I don't know if that works, but I will say this. If you want to discourage instead of encourage people from committing violent acts, then it would be nice if our elected officials act like responsible elected officials. They'd say something along the lines of, we don't like what ICE is doing, but you can't attack them. You shouldn't call them Nazis. Don't do that, because then we really could end up with a violent situation where a lot of people end up dead. And instead, these elected officials literally say the opposite. They do call them Nazis. They do say that they should be attacked. And it's incredible what they're doing. They are absolutely inciting people who are, again, incitement may not be the best word, but they're showing them that there's a green flag. In other words, go ahead and do this because we might cover for you. It's a good time to do this. So that's what's
To
happening.
me, it looks like they're giving them permission.
Yeah, they're certainly giving them the cover of finding some way to explain away their problems. You know, in
Right.
France, 6 years ago, maybe more, there was a 70-year-old Jewish woman living alone in an apartment in Paris. Some Arab migrant broke into her apartment, raped and killed her. And his defense in the trial was, well, I was seeing news from Israel and it was bothering me. And the judge acquitted him. It's just insane. Anybody who believes that nonsense. No, what you had was an Arab migrant who wanted to rape and murder someone, anyone. He did it. And he figured, I'll have an excuse when I do it, and maybe I'll get away with it. And that's what happened. And that's what we're going to see in all these cities where the governors and mayors have said stuff like this. You're going to find some judges who say, like, well, they were triggered. And of course, that's a ridiculous defense. It's not in any way logical or moral, but it is an absolute green flag for the most violent people. And Andrea, I'll tell you something else. I don't think these people actually care at all about illegal immigration. I don't even think they care about ICE. I think these are people who want to conduct violence. These are people who want to mix it up. They want to attack law enforcement of any kind. And the violence that they commit is not a means to another end. In other words, they're not attacking ICE because they hope to allow illegal immigration to continue freely in this country. No, it is the end. The violence is the end. You can tell they are literally getting off on it. I mean, maybe even sexually. They seem to really enjoy this kind of crazy, wild violence. And the issues in the news give them cover and some sort of explanation for doing what they've always wanted to do, which is to hurt people, vandalize buildings, spit on people, and kill. And that's what's going on right now. I don't believe these people actually understand the issue or even care
They
about it.
don't, not at all. The issue is not the issue, it's the revolution.
Mhm.
And they'll just pick whatever current event is going on right now. And right now it's ICE deportations. So they're making that the issue in order to go out into the streets. And we're watching foreign and domestic funding in the hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars going into, on one report, I looked at Minneapolis and there were connections within Minneapolis and then spidering out to all the other NGOs, all the way to foreign organizations. 90,000 organizations were involved in some way, shape, or form just in Minneapolis.
Yeah, it's a looting of the American treasury. It's a looting of America's wealth. It's an absolute invasion. For any of you listening or watching this who have a relative or a friend who wants to quote the plaque underneath the Statue of Liberty about how great America is and give us your tired and your poor, look, folks, that's all irrelevant now. We've had 20, 30, 40 million people storm the border over the 4 years of the Biden administration. There is absolutely no country that can absorb that. It's not about us being unkind. It's not about America being a country of immigrants. All of that is true. We are a kind country. We are a nation of immigrants. But that's not what's going on here.
No, no.
This was an invasion. It's
Now I
just like
watched
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry for interrupting. I watched the All In podcast last night and I did an X post in response to it. So we have two people on the All In podcast, and I like that podcast. You get different perspectives.
Mhm.
David Sachs comes on many times, and Freeberg, and what's the other guy? Jason, which is the main host. He's the one that, kind of manages it, runs it. We're saying that, implying that ICE and the street deportations are illegal and that they should be required to go to a judge to get a warrant first before they just go nab somebody off the street. We've had multiple Supreme Court rulings saying, based on the law that Congress voted in, that if there's reasonable suspicion, ICE is allowed to go and grab somebody out of a public area. So even these large podcasters are promulgating that false narrative that ICE is being some naughty, nasty uh, uh, law enforcement agency that is not following the rules. That's not true whatsoever. So I implore anybody out there that understands this, when you see a large influencer or a large podcast spew this misinformation, to challenge them.
That's right. Listen, we absolutely have the high moral ground here. I want everyone to understand this because the left comes at the ICE, the left comes at ICE, the left comes at this issue as if they're the compassionate ones, as if they're the ones on the high moral ground. That's not true. Let's start with ICE and the things you just said. The exact opposite is true of what they're saying about ICE. Let's talk about what they do. ICE is encountering illegal immigrants by the tens of thousands every single day. Every single day. So far this year, we've seen just 5 shootings, all of which were incredibly justified, all of which were instigated by the people who got shot. They fooled around and found out. Every police department in America would love to have that kind of ratio, where to several 100,000 engagements, they only have 5 shootings. The ICE is acting in an incredibly restrained manner. This lie that's being promoted in the public about how ICE doesn't have enough training and they're not, and they're a bunch of wild guys. The exact opposite is true. I'm sorry to make this comparison again. I promise you I'm not always obsessed with it. It's just that, Andrea, I'm very used to this particular kind of lie. So let me tell you another entity that gets lied about the same exact way by the same exact people, and that's the Israeli Defense Forces. The Israeli Defense Force could snap its fingers and eliminate all of its border enemies in a second. They don't. And in fact, they lose a lot of their own guys and gals every year because they are being extra humane, which infuriates their enemies, not only because they hate them and that they're winning battles, but it infuriates them because it further embarrasses them as being the moral cowards and the moral midgets that they really are. ICE is acting on an extremely high moral ground here, and they are proving it every single day. I'm proud of these young men and women who are working there and doing their incredible jobs. And by the way, at least a plurality and maybe even a majority of the ICE agents are Latinos. So they know just exactly what they're doing. They know their community, the legal Latino community, is suffering the most from these illegal aliens. So don't ever cede the moral ground to these people. And the other reason why we have the high moral ground, Andrea, is the simple fact that illegal immigration, and please say this with me because it's true, illegal immigration is slavery. And the Civil
It
War
sure is.
comparisons we're dealing with right now are apt. We are dealing with states and governors, just like we were doing with the Confederacy in 1860 and 61, who don't want to give up their cheap, almost free labor, don't want to give up the large group of people who give them money in a certain. Remember, because even slaves were counted as 3/5 of a person in the old Confederacy, which was a way for the Confederacy to make money off of them, to get federal funding
Right.
and to get congressional seats off of them, even though they didn't give them any representation and they weren't even citizens. This is the same thing. This is the same thing. And of course, we're dealing with people who are being paid well under minimum wage and things like that. And the last thing I'll say is another reason
But
why we have the
we
high
won't have
moral ground.
anybody to pick our crops. I'm
Yeah,
tired of that excuse. I won't have
yeah,
anybody to clean my toilets. I'm tired of that excuse.
yeah. Too bad. That's like saying, imagine if the slaveholder said, "Well, who's going to pick my cotton?" Well, that's exactly what they
Exactly.
say. Too bad.
Exactly. Exactly.
Pay someone more for it, or find a way to get some automated machine that will do it for you better. Which is, by the way, it's interesting that you say that, because one of the reasons why illegal immigration has become more of a bipartisan issue, and it is, by the way, 80% of the American public in every poll is against illegal immigration, and almost 60% of the American public is in favor of deporting every single illegal immigrant, whether they commit another crime or not. Period. One of the reasons why that's getting more traction in America is that the one Republican group that for years was weak about illegal immigration, and that's the Chamber of Commerce, corporate America Republican types, and there's plenty of liberal Democrat types in corporate America too. But those people in corporate America who were Republicans who supported open borders because it lowered wages and they figured they were going to make money off of it, because of AI and automation, they're no longer going to bat for that as much anymore. So, yeah, someone will clean your toilet, some robot will do it if that's what you want, or maybe you should pay someone a real wage. But illegal
Exactly.
immigration is slavery. And if you really cared about the illegal immigrants, and this is addressed to the guy who went to the church 2 weeks ago and was yelling at the top of his lungs at children, "What are you doing to help your Somali brothers?" Let me ask you, dude, what are you doing to help the illegal immigrants? If you really cared about them, you wouldn't be picketing and attacking a church. You'd be outside a nail salon. You ever seen a nail salon at closing time when they load 17, 18 Asian women into a 6-seater van and take them God knows where? You'd be outside the restaurants where they're paying the Latino busboys $2 an hour, maybe. You'd be outside the brothels that are filled with illegal alien women if you really cared about them. But you don't. And because you don't, I have the moral ground and you don't. And everybody who's against illegal immigration, be proud of the fact that we are against modern day slavery, just like the abolitionists were in the 1840s and 1850s. And we're going to stand for it. We're not going to give up on it just because these new Confederates, these new Wiley, Yosemite Sams of the world, Tim Walz, Mikey Sherrill, all these people who are defending slavery, I'm not backing down to them, and neither should you.
I'm not backing down to it either. So let's move to New Jersey since you brought up Mikey Sherrill. But first, I want to tell the audience Trevor Loudon also spoke about this in my episode 5. And he is an international expert on communism and the fusion of communists and the jihadists together. And he said, Andrea, watch out for New Jersey. New Jersey is a hotbed. And then, lo and behold, the Sherrill came out with a statement a couple days ago that, okay, they're not going to have the stop ICE grassroots ground level type infrastructure. She's going to command it from the governor's mansion, I guess. I don't know. So what's your perspective there? What do you think we'll see going forward? And
Yeah,
hopefully not.
so let's move from a Civil War analogy to a 1960s civil rights analogy. Mikey Sherrill is the new George Wallace, standing in the doorhouse of the schoolhouse door at University of Alabama, telling the federal government they can't let a black student come into that school. They can't make him do it. Mikey Sherrill is literally saying she's going to take the taxpayers' money of the people of New Jersey to create a website and to create a task force that will follow ICE, basically put the ICE members in danger, let everyone know where they are, expose them, and put them in harm's way. And that's what your taxpayer money is going to be used for in the state of New Jersey. All because she wants to protect illegal immigration. And when she made this announcement, she didn't do it from a podium in a taped closed room. She did it with a journalist, a so-called
Right.
journalist. I don't understand how I mean, I do understand it, but it just goes to show how much the mainstream media is complicit in these crimes against humanity. You have a governor who's announcing this, and as a journalist, you don't ask, wait a minute, governor, why are you protecting illegal immigration? Most people don't want that. And some of these illegal immigrants are really dangerous criminals. Why would you use our taxpayer money to impede the federal government, which is coming in on their dime to take care of this? And they don't even, and she knows when she goes in front of most journalists, she'll never be asked that question. It's such a travesty that when you talk about threats to democracy, it's people posing as journalists who don't ask these kinds of basic questions, who are a tremendous threat to our democracy, because in blue states especially, but really in other states too, these elected officials know they'll never be questioned on the mainstream media platforms that still too many people are watching, especially people who aren't conservatives, who don't think for themselves. It's a shame.
So let me ask you a question. What's the carrot and stick that the administration can do for New Jersey?
Well, I
Well,
think it's
first
pretty
of all, let me
obvious.
let me stop this. She ran as a moderate
Yeah, yeah,
too.
yeah, of course.
And I looked into her background, and she was very, very careful about her associations before she was running. But her true colors have come out since she's been elected. So
Yeah,
what's the
it's
carrot and stick for
well,
the
look,
Trump administration?
and I think, by the way, we're going to see more of this in the coming days. Now, and some people might say why we haven't seen this in Minnesota, but let me talk about the best one that there is. Whenever the federal government really wants to deal with something that the states might push back on, to me, the most obvious thing, and especially this is especially true in New Jersey, where there are a lot of highways, is highway funding. If and all you need to do is find some connection to the highways to justify pulling their highway funding. For those of you who don't know, roads are really expensive, and the expense never goes away. They're so expensive that there are states all over the United States that are dying to find numbers that show that some roads aren't being used as much, so they can just close them down altogether, because it's just an incredible expense. Without federal funding for your highways in any state in America, no matter how rich or poor it is, the state could really go bankrupt. So that would be the first thing. And if I were President Trump or Secretary Duffy from the Transportation Department, I would say, well, since our ICE agents are using your highways to try to stop illegal immigrants who are also using your highways from escaping and from getting away from us, we are not going to give you any funding for those highways if you're going to be using them to monitor us and put our ICE agents in danger. That's one thing. Another thing they could do is say, forget about any prison funding. Whatever funding you have for your prisons, we're not going to give you that either. There's a lot of federal funding that these states absolutely desperately need. They need Medicare funding, they need Medicaid funding, and I would absolutely pull out all the stops. These people, this isn't just like, for example, some of the states who balked a little bit back in the 80s when the federal government wanted to make 21 the national drinking age. And they also used highway funding as the carrot, as the stick on that, by the way. That was the
Right.
stick. And
Mhm.
it worked really well. But this is nothing compared to that. This is literally saying federal agents, law enforcement agents, we are going to put them in danger in this state. I mean, this
Right.
is Confederacy like stuff. This is George Wallace during the Civil Rights era saying that if the FBI comes down here and those Hoover men come down here, they could get lynched. This is an absolute insurrection, and everything. Now, some people say, well, why didn't that happen in Minnesota? Why didn't Trump threaten to do that? And the answer was is that they found another compromise in Minnesota. A lot of people are saying, oh, Trump backed down. No, he didn't back down. Governor Walz and Mayor Frey finally agreed to allow the local police departments to start arresting some of these anti-ICE terrorists. And in return for that, Tom Homan was able to say, like, well, if you're going to arrest these anti-ICE attackers, then I can reduce the number of ICE agents in the state because they won't be needed there for as much safety anymore to provide cover for the other guys who are still doing stuff. And we learned just in the last day or so that the number of deportations and arrests haven't gone down at all. they've continued and they've surged in Minneapolis actually because they're able to do so.
So
So
let
yeah,
me get into this subject a little bit further, because I've also watched other podcasters, whether they're conservative or not, that's questionable. But for example, Megyn Kelly came out after Tom Homan's first press conference in Minnesota, and she was like adamant, we did not vote for this, only to deport illegals that have a criminal background. That's not what we voted for. We voted to send everyone out of the country, every single illegal that crosses border, whether through a port or gotaways. And I'm looking at what you just said, and I'm looking at what the Trump administration said. You cannot, in my opinion, especially since it's 2026 and we're going into midterms, you can't just take a broad sweep and just flip everything overnight. And he has to maintain and pull in more of the public support going forward. So, how do you view it?
well, I think uh, well, for example, one of the pollsters that I respect the most, I do respect him the most, and I think he understands the American voting public better than anyone out there.
Mhm.
This guy named Scott Rasmussen. Now, not to be confused with Rasmussen Reports. Yes, he did found that, but it's been more than 10 years since he left Rasmussen Reports. They liked his name, so they kept it. But now he's with a group called the Napolitan Group and RMG. And he came out with a poll yesterday showing that on immigration, despite the fact that the left has been bashing the administration and the Republicans over this for days and days and days. On the issue of immigration, Republicans are still favored over Democrats by the American voter by 7 percentage points, despite this incredible barrage that's been going on. So all I can say is keep it up, Democrats. Keep it up, left wingers. When you're going into an election, the best that you can hope for is that the issue that you're leading on in the polls remains at the top of the news. If I were advising the Republicans, I say, hey guys, keep talking about immigration. But I don't need to do that because the Democrats are doing it for you. Thank you very much. The issue that they lead by a lot on is healthcare. And have you
Mhm.
noticed that the whole issue of Obamacare subsidies and it has gone out of the news? It's a
Mhm.
great gift to the Republicans right now. I don't want the Obamacare subsidies to continue either, but the polls aren't good on that for the Republicans because they haven't been able to articulate a good replacement because they don't listen to me about that. That's okay. I don't expect them to. But
Who's Jake?
yeah,
Oh,
that's
I'm just
fine. They
giving you
don't
a
have to
hard
listen to
time.
me. But the thing is, this is great. Let's keep talking about illegal immigration. I think the president should talk about it all the time. I think Republicans should talk about it all the time because 80% of the American people oppose illegal immigration, period. And most of the American people want every illegal immigrant deported, period. And that hasn't changed, and it's not going to change. And it's a big winner of an issue for the Republicans. That's not why President Trump asked ICE to get rid of these illegal aliens. He did that because they are a threat to the economy and threat to our national security. But it also happens to be an election winner for them right now, thanks to the way
Amen.
the Democrats are responding. So I would say, Andrea, just keep pounding the table about it. Let's talk about it every single day. But we need to do a better job of pushing back. What I said before about how illegal immigration is slavery, I want to hear more Republicans and conservatives saying that. They're not saying it enough. And I want to hear more Republicans talk about how these people who are the Mikey Sherrills and the Governor Walzes, they are literally putting federal agents' lives on the line, and they're using our taxpayer money, your taxpayer money, New Jersey
And
administration.
citizens, community
Right,
residents.
that's right.
Mhm.
To put people in danger instead of allowing people to help public safety. And they're
Mhm.
lying about ICE. ICE isn't causing the chaos. It's the people attacking them causing the chaos who would choose something else to cause the chaos over, as you noted earlier in the show. It's not about ICE. It's about it's about their decision to want to have chaos, period. And they are being literally lied about at a 100% level. This is the most restrained law enforcement group I've ever seen in American history. They've only had 5 shootings this year in the midst of hundreds of thousands of engagements with potential attackers and potential and people they need to deport. That's an incredible record of restraint. You know,
Very
I wish
incredible.
our cops were
Okay,
like
so
that.
getting back to that
Yeah,
5 number, whatever you gave earlier, how many people have been murdered, raped,
yeah.
maimed, killed, stabbed from illegals over the last 4 years? How many of the mainstream media have said their name even, have reported on it? it's so lopsided, so lopsided. So
Yeah.
I want to just get back to the illegals and its slavery and how is it impacting the American person. Well, when I was watching this happen under the Biden administration, I was also looking at potentially moving to another state, buying some property. So I started looking at housing costs and housing prices and rentals, et cetera, et cetera. So we had, who knows, 30, 40 million illegals that came over the border or gotaways in the last 4 years under the Biden administration. I looked at affordability as far as apartments and rent, and I also looked at housing inventory and the affordability. And when I looked at this, I think it was in 2022 or 2023. I'd have to go back and look. We were short, and this is from progressive organizations. It was a bipartisan report, but we were short 7.3 million affordable rental units back then. We were also short 6 million single family homes back then. So what do you think is going to happen? I mean, there's other factors, right, in regards to why housing is so expensive. But what are you going to think when the supply and the demand is out of tilt?
Well, it's already happened. I'm so glad you mentioned this. We had two reports just in the last couple of days about how rental costs in some major cities are going down. They're at 4 or 5 year lows. That's because of supply and demand. It's clear now. It's not just the deportations. There's a lot of people who get caught up in just the numbers and they don't understand that in most things, the trend is your friend. So if there are 30 million illegal aliens that you need to get out of this country, and you only deport 1 million after a while, but no more of them are coming in, that's a good trend. The trend is your friend. If you're betting on it, it's a way to, if things are going better. So sure, we still need a lot more affordable units in different places, but we're at 4 year lows because it's becoming clear. There's also people who are noticing that in cities like Los Angeles, traffic has been getting better because a lot of these illegals are staying off the roads. They don't want to get deported, or more likely, they're just as likely they're self-deporting.
Right.
Self-deportation is not a pie in the sky fantasy. It happens all the time. We had a massive self-deportation wave in this country in 2008 and 2009 when the economy crashed and there weren't as many paying jobs, however badly paying they are, for illegal immigrants. And millions of them crossed back the border the other way without anyone chasing them on the way out. So
Exactly.
self-deportation really does happen. It's happened at massive levels, and I believe it's happening now. And the result, in addition to the actual deportations, is more housing is available. We're seeing less traffic. I would also like to see what's going on in the emergency rooms in some of the major cities. Are they getting a little bit less crowded, especially on weekends and things like that? We'll have to see. But this is absolutely a trend is your friend type situation. It's a very good point to make, and it's something that this U.S. economy needs. If all things were being equal, I would be willing to entertain the libertarian argument about how, like, well, we still need these kind of lower level workers, and maybe we can find a way for amnesty for them. All of that is moot. It's all null and void now because we're still dealing with 30 million illegal immigrants, or maybe more, who came in since 2021. There is no libertarian or any kind of economic model that's ever been drawn up to deal with that kind of a high number. It's outrageous. It's an invasion. We can't talk about this on economics scale only. So the libertarians can really can it right now. And I'm mostly libertarian myself. But you can be a libertarian all you want. You had 30, 40 million illegal aliens come into this country over a 4 year period. There is no economic model for that, period. We need to get them out. We need to get most of them out. And then we can start talking about how we have an easier path towards immigration legally in this country. But only
so let me tell you a little story, Jake. You'll get some amusement out of it, maybe. I don't know. So I lived in a 500 unit apartment building before I moved. And this was in 2021 when Biden came into office. And it received a lot of COVID-19 funding. Number one, that's how it stayed operable during the shutdowns. Number two, it also received HUD funding. It was a very, very bad neighborhood. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
But it was a mixed group of people in this apartment building. It wasn't all HUD. I mean, it was a mixed group. But all of a sudden, I started noticing that it appeared that it was a dumping place for illegals.
Mm.
And at the same time, I'm watching my poor neighbors, my neighbors, low income or low middle class, just trying to make ends meet. One weekend, I'm outside just visiting everybody, and there's at least 3 or 4 people trying to fix their cars. They can't afford to buy a new car. They can't afford to find parts. I mean, supply chain, issues were still apparent and whatnot. And what do I see one day? I'm sorry, I'm just taking off my notifications. What do I see one day? I see this airport van pull up right in front of my unit. I'm looking out the picture window. There's no sign on the airport van. It's just white. And then I'm watching. And 10 people pile out of the van. It's a family, 3 generations. Grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, 3 children, and mom's pregnant with a baby on the way. So they pile out of the van. They take, a few of them have a backpack on. They go up into the apartment, and lo and behold, it's right across the hall from me. So I open up the door, and the door of their apartment is open. It's completely empty, no furniture, no nothing. Next thing I know, they leave and come back like 4 hours later. Like one of those, real long airport vans, they come back. The van is totally packed to the ceiling. So they went out and bought everything. And somebody was driving them around. So they came out with brand new suitcases, brand new clothes. Who knows? All this stuff, they just kept on piling it out. So I watched over the course of the time that somebody would come and pick them up every day or every other day or whatever, take them to the doctor's office, take them here, help them with that. And it really broke my heart, and it really made me mad because I'm watching my other neighbors that are working really hard to just fix their car. I'm watching my other neighbors get evicted because they're not getting money from the government, the ones that weren't underneath HUD, but just trying to get a leg up in life. So I saw that happen quite a lot in the area that I lived.
Yeah,
and nobody would say anything. Nobody would say anything.
Yeah, I know. I mean, this was a it'd be one thing if it were an invasion, but it was well funded. In New York City, some hotels that were luxury hotels were filled, and still are in some cases, with illegal immigrants who are not only taking up those rooms, and it was something that the hotels at first were okay with because during COVID they were like, well, this way we'll get some money, but they're also being given cash cars and things like that. You see them on the subways.
Neither one of them had a job.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to get a job for them.
Yeah.
But they did get a work permit finally.
Yeah. It's a total scam, and it's dangerous. It hurts our economy. All the old arguments about whatever positives open borders can sometimes be for an economy are null and void at this scale. This scale is absolutely unprecedented in every single way. And that's exactly what the Biden team wanted. They were looking for a bunch of different benefits for them to come from this invasion, not the least of which being going and populating the states, Democrat states.
This was a red state, very red state.
Right. We just found out really, really strongly, based on some Census Bureau stuff, the 10 states in the United States that have the most increases in population of citizens, not illegal immigrants, all voted for Trump in 2024. The 10 states in the United States that have had the biggest decreases in citizenship all voted for Kamala Harris. So it's just obvious what they're trying to do. They need to repopulate these states that they've destroyed with their Democrat policies, and they're looking to funnel these people, these illegal immigrants, into those cities. This is their political survival at stake. But honestly, I think that it'd be great if 1 or 2 of them would be able to defect from that. Forget about John Fetterman. If there were a blue state governor out there who would come out and say, we're for ICE, we will support ICE, that guy's poll numbers would shoot through the roof. We need to have a couple more selfish and self-interested Democrats out there. What makes me really sick is how the DNC seems to control every elected Democrat from mayor on up in America. There are very few people who think for themselves. There's only one John Fetterman, and he's only a senator, which means he really can't enact state policy. Where is the Democrat governor or the Democrat mayor to say, we're not doing this. Eric Adams, who just lost his job in New York as the mayor, complained about all the costs of illegal immigration. But every time, Andrea, every time they asked him, would you support President Trump? Would you support closing the border? Would you support? He never said yes. So you
Right.
know what? He has only himself to blame. His
He's on
poll
the
numbers would have
fence.
gone
He's
up
just on the
if he
fence.
had
He's a
done that.
politician.
Yeah.
So we're going to be closing up soon. Is there anything that you want to cover that we haven't covered? But first, I want you to answer this question. Moving forward in 2026, say this again. What is the narrative that the Trump administration and his cabinet members should be going out on the airwaves in every news channel, cable channel, and stating at this moment in time?
Well, they should be talking about how the economy is still not good enough. They should stop talking about all the great things they've done, despite the fact that I think they have been great. But they should start talking about how things are going to get better based on some of the policies that went into effect because of the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill. Remember, President Trump
Yeah.
signed it on July 4th, 2025. And we're finally seeing, because the new year has started, some real positive effects from it. Now, the thing that they're talking about first is the fact that most people are going to be getting the biggest tax refund they've ever received in their life. And that's great. That's an easy thing to
I'll just pay
understand.
less.
Yeah, they should talk about that. But
Yeah.
the thing about tax refunds is usually when you get a big tax refund, that's actually not a good thing. That means that you gave the government a free loan all year. But in this case, I'm going to give you a pass because it was hard to tell exactly when that bill would go into effect, when the new rules would go into effect. And so you had to just be careful and keep withholding the money that you were going to be withholding. But you're going to get a bigger tax refund. So that's one thing President Trump needs to remind everybody, hey, file your taxes as soon as you can because you're going to get a bigger refund. But he also needs to be telling people that because of the other tax changes in the One Big Beautiful Bill, which only help mid to small businesses out there. This is not a big corporate giveaway. But for example, almost every business expenditure that a mid-sized to small business makes under the new tax laws is almost 100% deductible now. He's changed the rules of depreciation. I don't want to get into the minutia here, but the
No.
point is, small and mid-sized businesses in this country since the beginning of this year, and really since the end of last year to some degree, have had a tremendous, tremendous shot in the arm. And President Trump should be talking about the positives we're about to see from that. And if he has any data about how it's happening already, he should push that as well. So in other words, he should do the old Bill Clinton thing. Bill Clinton was a brilliant politician. You can't take that away from him. And he used to do things like, we can do better. We can do better. And that's what President Trump should say. Like, we're going to do better. We've already done all these great things, and it's going to get better because of what we did in the One Big Beautiful Bill. You're going to get this big tax refund. There's going to be a lot of hiring in small businesses and expansion there. And just wait for all this to happen. Even as the Democrats are freaking out about all the other things they want to talk about, notice how they haven't done a thing to lower your costs at home. Notice how they haven't done a thing to lower your taxes and get you. And I've done all those things, and we're going to keep doing it. That's the message.
So I used to wait tables while I was putting myself through college. In fact, I started at an ice cream shop at 14, and then I worked myself up to a five-star restaurant. I loved it, by the way. I miss it still today. I really miss it because I'm a very public, personable person. I
Yeah.
like everybody. I love everybody. And what I saw in that big, beautiful bill were the people, the average, everyday people that work really hard, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning or work until 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is, trying to put themselves through school, trying to feed their children, put some food on the table, the waitresses, the senior citizens that are stretching, trying to stretch their budget because they just can't afford medicine or whatever. Those are the people that big, beautiful bill really help. And that, I mean, I came from a poor family. I still have that in my heart. And I still have in my heart that, that appreciation for, not that I'm rich, I am not rich, but the appreciation for the person that puts those boots on every morning, gets out into the car at 6 o'clock, goes and does a long, hard day's work for maybe not that much money. And they're just trying to figure out, how am I going to feed my 3 kids between now and the next payday, because the money is stretching thin.
Yeah, and we shouldn't, by the way, we shouldn't limit our advice on messaging just to President Trump. Remember, he's not running. These are midterm elections where we're going to have congressional and statewide elections.
Right.
Every Republican in every state needs to be pointing to what's happening in Minnesota with the Somalis looting the Treasury there, and in Maine
And
and
it's
other
not
states.
racist, by the way.
Right. And say, and instead of just saying these people are bad, if I were a Republican running for any state office in any of these states, I would surround myself with native-born Minnesotans if I were running in Minnesota, native-born Mainers. I used to live in Maine. They call themselves Mainers. And
Hmm.
say, these are our veterans. These are our native-born Maine people who are struggling right now. And every penny that the Somalis stole, every penny that these other illegal immigrant or even legal immigrant groups stole is a penny taken away from our poor people who we have the first responsibility to, our veterans who we have the first responsibility to. Remember, if they want to play the victimhood game, which Democrats play really well, we have to fight fire with fire. And you better believe there are American citizens, not just rich people who are having to pay a little bit more taxes and now I can't buy that extra set of golf clubs. It's the veteran who can't get decent care at the VA and can't afford to see a private doctor. It's the poor American citizen in Maine who needs a lot more money to pay for heat this winter, who is being robbed because every penny that's being stolen from them is really being stolen from them, not from the rich, although obviously they pay for it in the taxes, but you get my point. That
Right.
has to be part of the Republican messaging in these midterm elections. Let's beat them at the victimhood game because we have to do that. And it's a great way for the American people to understand who the real victims of this fraud is. It's not just the rich. It's more importantly, American-born poor and veterans who are getting robbed. And that, if that isn't part of their
And
messaging,
senior
then they
citizens.
deserve to lose.
And the senior citizens. I
Yeah.
have a aunt that falls within that category, and life is difficult for her, very difficult.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank you today, Jake, for coming on board. I want to let my audience know that on Monday I have a fantastic guest scheduled. So stay tuned. Make sure you turn on that notification bell. And Jake, I want to make sure that you come back again. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm glad you're feeling better. I'm feeling better. We'll be 100% next time we do it.
Yeah, my voice is finally coming back.
Yeah.
Before, just to utter any audio from my voice, I had to scream at the top of my lungs and it would come out with these squeaks. So yeah, I'm feeling so much better and I'm glad you are too. So have a great day. In faith and freedom, God bless America, and be safe out there, my friends. Thank you,
I will.
Jake. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
History shows that it is precisely when totalitarian regimes begin to decay from within, it is precisely when they feel the first real stirrings of domestic unrest,